Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 2054. The topic is Q&A, and the title is How to Rebuild a Healthy Metabolism After Ozempic. I had a nutrition client reach out over the weekend. We started working together, and I thought I'd share their story. It's very similar to everyone else's story in this category. So they wrote the following in their initial message. I lost a bunch of weight, but not in a good way. So I'm wanting some guidance on how to get back to normal life without gaining a whole bunch of weight back. I've also lost a ton of muscle in this process, but I really want to focus on the nutrition part first before worrying about weight training. I am worried if I exercise, that will make me even more hungry and cause me to gain even more weight. So in their initial message, they said that they had used Ozempic in order to lose the weight. So they lost a ton of weight, but they lost it in kind of a negative way. And before I move on, what in their mind, what negative was is they don't feel like they look any better because they lost a lot of muscle as they were losing fat. So their body composition, like the relationship of muscle to fat, didn't really change. So one of the ways I kind of explain that is if somebody's shaped like an apple, they just go from a bigger apple to a smaller apple, but they're still shaped like an apple. So the shape doesn't change. The softness doesn't change. The look of the body doesn't change. They just weigh less. So they're smaller in their clothes for sure, but they just don't look much different. And that's what she was experiencing. But she was also experiencing excessive weight gain. So when we talked, what she said was within 4 weeks of stopping Ozempic, she started to gain weight back without increasing her food. She had gained over 10 pounds in 4 weeks, and she was starving all day. She remained kind of open-minded that she may be blind to some things, she said, but I really have not eaten more. I've even asked my husband, and he agrees. Smart man. But I hope that if he didn't agree, he would feel safe in that relationship to tell her. But he didn't. He said she hasn't really been eating more. She hasn't really been eating more, but the weight just keeps kind of pounding on, keeps adding up. So I asked, well, what have you been eating? Like, what were you eating with Ozempic, and what have you been eating since? And she said it's been the same foods. She has a pepperoni and cheese lean pocket, which is like, I believe, a Hot Pocket ripoff. And it's 280 calories, 8 grams of fat, 42 grams of carbs, and 10 grams of protein for breakfast. So that's all she has for breakfast. Lunch, she has some carrots with ranch dressing and turkey on Ritz crackers. We don't know the exact amount, so I'm going to guesstimate that to around 500 calories and around 25 grams of protein. Dinner, she said they usually have chicken and ground beef and often pasta, but, quote, I eat very little portions of whatever I would throw together for the kids. So again, at most, probably 500 calories, 25 grams of protein. So a probably upper estimate would be around 1,300 calories with 60 grams of protein a day. And they were gaining weight. Yikes. So at a body weight of, say, around 130 to 150 pounds, she should be able to eat in excess of 1,700 calories, like probably 1,700 to 2,000 calories, especially with kids and run around, during the day. She should be able to eat around 1,700 to 2,000 calories without really gaining body weight. Now, 2,000 might be on the upper level, but 1,700, I'd feel pretty sure that they should be able to eat 1,700 calories and be fine with weight maintenance. Now, part of the weight change coming off of the drug is going to be attributable to water retention changes, but over 4 weeks, that should have kind of normalized, especially considering she just kept eating the same food. So there wasn't like sodium differences, carb differences. It really should have been maybe an initial, 1 week, maybe up to 2 week kind of reaction. But she's been continuing to gain weight all 4 weeks. And that's just a big bummer. It's an indication that She's storing body fat, not water. And if she's storing body fat at a caloric intake of only 1,300 calories at most, so again, I've estimated a little bit more, so it could be as low as 1,100 or 1,000. So she's gaining body fat, storing body fat at a caloric intake less than 10 times her body weight. That is an indication of her metabolism being just crushed, absolutely crushed. And this is common in clients who come off of Ozempic or other similar GLP-1 receptor antagonists. Those drugs, while they're on the drug, they severely decrease caloric intake, and the drugs kind of protect them from the feeling of that. And then often they're prescribed hunger suppressants like phentermine as well. So they end up in this extreme caloric deficit, but they're protected from the feelings of the deficit by the drugs. This is common in drug-supported diets. Their body essentially is going to then attempt to find homeostasis, try to find survival level at that lowered caloric intake. So it will decrease its caloric output. And it decreases it towards all non-essential processes such as hair, skin, nails, and there are other things. And then also what this client experienced is muscle tissue maintenance. Muscles require calories to repair and stay alive and do their functions. But when the body is in too extreme of a deficit, the body will not allocate those calories to the muscles. The body will allow the muscles to break down for extra protein, for extra energy, until the loss of muscle function would become life-threatening. I see this in my anorexic patients. I've worked with, not patients because I'm not a doctor, anorexic clients. They work, I work with a therapist who sends referrals, and then I also get people to just reach out due to that experience and knowing about it. Now, I was actually anorexic when I was younger. For 2.5 years, I would eat one meal a day and try to exercise those calories off. It was horrendous and just a horrible quality of life. So I have that experience, which sounds crazy because if you look at me now on social media, I'm 290 pounds. But at the time when I was anorexic, I was 165 pounds and I was 5'8". For 2.5 years, I restricted my calories. I would end the day at a net negative. It was incredibly unhealthy. So I still actually somehow gained height to 6 foot tall over those years, but I stayed 165. So I got 4 inches taller, but stayed the same weight, lost muscle tissue, and I had worse body composition, 4 inches taller at the same weight than when I started. You had no visible veins, no visible muscle tissue. You could grab a roll of fat around my midsection. But I had exercised damn near every day, literally every day. I've exercised every single day of a year, several years of my life. And it was just a horrible thing I did to my body. But I see that in the people I work with who suffer from that as well. And you end up with this super thin person, bulging joints because they have no muscle around the joints, and they're just very weak. The benefit of these drugs, though, there is a benefit. The benefit of these drugs is the person does lose body fat. So if they had a life-threatening condition related to total body weight and or body fat, then these drugs worked. These drugs will save someone's life. But then, what do we do after these drugs? When people take the drugs for cosmetic reasons, when people are prescribed the drugs in absence of life-threatening reasons, they just want to look better and lose weight. And, it's quote-unquote for health, but really they just want to do it because they want to see the difference, right? There's definitely health involved, but it's primarily driven by wanting to look better. The same issue occurs. The same problem happens. The same question is what we end with is, what do I do after these drugs? The answer is we have to rebuild the metabolism. What that process looks like is a little different for each client I've worked with, but I want to give the general theme in today's podcast. So I will give answers. I'm going to give you step-by-step of what I take my clients through, but it does look a little different per client. I want that to be known because if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I couldn't do that, you don't have to. So everybody does a little different version of this stuff. But essentially, you have to take them from where they are now, calorie and protein-wise, and then work them up slowly to where they should be. And then you use exercise to help drive positive hormonal and metabolic benefits. The key for exercise, though, is you should not aim to cause excessive muscle tissue breakdown. So when you exercise, you're not doing it to try to tear the muscle apart to build bigger muscles. You actually want to focus on strength-based adaptations, neurological adaptations. We want to strengthen the body. We want to stimulate bone density regeneration, stimulate testosterone and healthy hormone production. You don't want to tear muscle down because the person isn't eating enough calories to fuel new muscle formation, let alone to actually repair the existing muscle. So that comes at a later date. You do not aim to tear muscle apart when somebody's in this extreme of a caloric deficit. You can exercise, and there is tons of benefits to exercise, but it has to be done in a strength-based manner, not in a muscle tissue damage-based manner. Okay? Typically, we don't add muscle damaging type training into their routine until we're at least over 10 times body weight, lean body weight. 10 times lean body weight in calorie intake and 0.6 grams of protein per lean pound of body weight in their diet. Now, those are just general markers, not steadfast rules, but it gives you a general guideline of where you should be calorie and protein wise. So let's go through this like for this client. I'll give you the steps that we took for this client, and these will be the same steps we take for everybody, but we're going to use their actual individual numbers. So the first step we take is to eat early. I want to change when they eat. So this client, they have only less than 300 calories for breakfast. They're up and moving before they have breakfast. Then they move all the way till lunch. They're going to be burning and using a hell of a lot more than 300 calories. A hell of a lot more. Then at lunch, they maybe have 500 calories. At dinner, they maybe have 500 calories. So they're actually intaking energy after using it. So they're getting themselves into a deficit by eating later, by setting their calories to where they're not having a good initial influx of calories at the start of the day, which is actually what we would like. We would like to kind of fill up the gas tank and then burn the gas off throughout the day. Now, we don't have to fill up the gas tank all the way, so I'm not going to ask them to eat all of their calories for the day in their breakfast. So what I mean by this is I want to put in more fuel, or about as much fuel as I would use from breakfast to lunch in my breakfast. So breaking down a person's day, and I'm going to use very simple math just to make it easier for me. So let's say at the end of the day, the person needs 1,800 calories. So from breakfast to lunch is going to be roughly a third of their day, the first third. And then lunch to dinner would be the second third, then dinner to bed would be the third, right? So if it's 1,800 calories a day, the first third of the day, they're going to use roughly about 600 calories. I don't want to eat 600 calories at lunch. After I use the 600 calories, I want to eat 600 calories at breakfast. So I can then use those 600 calories to get to lunch. If we eat ahead of our expenditure, you'll have much better daily energy, much better mood, and you're going to essentially decrease the desire of the body to store body fat. You're giving the body what it needs. So a similar way of thinking about this is finances. Is if you're like, hey, each week I need $1,000. I'm just making up a number. Okay, so each week I need $1,000. Well, let's go. Okay, $2,000. You need $2,000 every week. How about that? So $2,000 every week. And I'm like, okay, every week for the rest of your life, I'm going to give you $2,000. You're like, oh, okay. And it's going to happen. It's coming no matter what. There was that lottery ticket game. I think it was like $1,000 a week for life, whatever that is. I think that's still a thing. But let's say that you won that. So you're getting the $2,000 that you need. You're going to get that $2,000 every week for the rest of your life. It's never not going to happen. You can count on it, bank on it, boom, done. So you're going to think to yourself do I really need to save money? Maybe, if I want to do some extra vacations, if I want to do some extra stuff, I might want to have a little bit of a protective cushion. But think about what your desire to save money is when you know you're getting $2,000 every week versus you didn't win that thing and you have to go out and earn those $2,000. But maybe you're an entrepreneur and money isn't always consistent. So it's not a job with a paycheck that you can count on it being $2,000. You have to go out and produce $2,000 every week. And you're like, well, this is a little more iffy, right? It's a little more uncertain. I'm pretty sure I could do it. 99.9% of the time, I'm probably going to do it. But what if I don't? What if I don't? Now, that feeling to save money is greater. When the income is inconsistent, our desire to save increases, right? When our caloric intake is inconsistent, our body's desire to save increases. And how does our body save calories? It's stored body fat. So we want to be more consistent with our intake, and we want to better time the intake. It doesn't help you if I give you the $2,000 after your bills are due, right? I have to give you the $2,000 before your bills are due. We want to give the body the calories before the calories are due, before the calories are demanded. So feeding ahead of movement is extremely important because it gives the body what it needs, and it no longer has the desire to create body fat, to store calories as body fat. So we want to eat early in the day. We want to eat ahead of our expenditure. So we use time blocks. We divide the day into 6-hour blocks. So the first 6 hours of being awake, the second 6 hours of being awake, and then the final, whatever hours of being awake. That is going to help us distribute our calories and protein to better match our usage, and that will decrease and actually eventually eliminate the body's desire to store body fat, to create new body fat. To learn about time blocks, you can listen to podcast 1757. If you can't find that podcast on the podcast platform you're on, you can go to our website, www.brutalirongym.com. On the website, we have a podcast player that goes back 300 episodes, but underneath that, we have instructions on how to find even older podcasts. So if you listen to this by the time that podcast 2057 rolls around, you won't be able to access it on the website podcast player because, again, it only goes back 300. So if you're listening to this on the first 1 or 2 days or so, you're great. Just go to the website, scroll to the bottom, and boom, there it is. But if you need to, there's the instructions on how to find older podcasts underneath that. So again, it's podcast 1757. It's a nutrition podcast titled Using Time Blocks for Easier Macronutrient Tracking. This allows you to be more aware of your calorie and protein intake, but have it be better timed throughout the day and get that benefit that we want. So that's the first thing we're going to do with this client, and I do with all my clients, is try to get calories coming in ahead of their activity. Try to shift their calories rather than being all at the end of the day, shift it to being throughout the day, but more so front-loaded in the day. The second thing we do is we have to calculate the ending caloric and protein intake. So when they stopped taking Ozempic, when they stopped taking their drugs, where were their calories and protein at when they ended? So for this client, I already asked them that. We calculated through the day, and we found out their common foods were around 1,300 calories with 60 grams of protein. That was probably on a good day, meaning they were probably a little bit less than that. But that's what we got to do. We got to figure out where we're at kind of at the end of taking the drugs. So you can use nutrition tracking app, where you can write down foods you commonly eat and look up the nutrition facts. If you do that online, it's probably just easier to use an app anyhow. So you can go into a food app. If you've never used one before, you just open it up and you type in the food that you eat, and then it'll give you a selection. Like if you type in chicken breast, it'll ask if you did it with skin or without skin, cooked, uncooked. It'll ask you some questions, and that can be a little intimidating, a little frustrating, but if you practice it and you get used to it, it'll give you the numbers. Or you can just do a Google search and find the nutrition facts per food that you eat throughout the day. You just want to get a general idea. It's okay if you don't have the exact foods every day and everything isn't always perfect. You want to have just a general idea. The more specific you know, the better, but a general idea of your calories and protein when you stopped taking the drugs. Then we want to calculate kind of our target intakes, which will be considered the minimum healthy amounts. Now, this is up for debate, and people will have different approaches on this, but this is the approach I use, and it's worked out every single time so far. I'm open to changing it in the future if a change is needed, but so far it's working great, so I'm going to keep it going, but I always do keep an open mind on if anything needs to change. But currently what I'm doing is I calculate lean body weight as what would the person weigh if they had around, say, 10 to 20% body fat. And I'll allow up to 20% if somebody's overweight and or have a higher body fat percentage. So if they're dieting from like 30+% down, we could go with 20%. If somebody's already lean-ish, they're already at like 20 or 25%, then I'll pump it down more towards the 10%. But we want to know, how much would you weigh if you had around 10 to 20% body fat? And then we want to take that number and multiply it by 13, and that gives us our general target range for calories. And we want to take that number and multiply it, not that number is the calorie number, but take that 10 to 20% body fat weight, take that and multiply it by 0.6. And that gives us our kind of target protein range. So for this client, let's say they're around 150 pounds, but they're around 30% body fat. So if we figured out their lean body weight, which would be how much they weigh at around 10 to 20% body fat, it's roughly, plus or minus some numbers, around 120 to 130 pounds. So their healthy intake ranges, their target ranges, are going to be calories of 1550 to 1700 and protein of 70 to 80 grams. So what I do is I take that lean body weight, and we said it was 10 to 20%. So I take the lean body weight times 10 and multiply it by 13, and the lean body weight at 20% body fat and multiply it by, so I'm trying to figure out how to explain this better, and I feel like I'm maybe making it more confusing. I'm sorry. So what we're looking for is their lean body weight times 13. The challenge is the lean body weight times 13. Let's say it gives you a number of 1625. You're not going to get 1625 every single freaking day calorie-wise. It's not happening. You're not going to get the exact same singular number of calories every single day. It's insane. You're going to drive yourself nuts. You're going to feel like a failure all the time. 99.9% of diet apps are set up that way. Like, aim for this number. So stupid, unnecessary, and just mentally and emotionally torture. They don't need to be set up that way. So we want to have a range. So let's make it a little bit easier here. Let's go with the lean body weight times 13. Then you're going to do that number plus or minus 10%. And that's going to give you a little bit of a range. So for this client, for example, their range is 1550 to 1700. That's a 150 calorie range. It's actually kind of a small range, but we have a small number here to be working with. So 1550 calories isn't a lot in the first place. But a 150 calorie range is more doable and to be consistent with than trying to hit a singular specific number every day. So rather than 1625, if I were to have, say 75 calories less, 75 calories more, that then puts me 1550 to 1700. That's close enough that I will make progress. I don't need 1625 on the dot every day to make progress. If I eat a little bit above that, like 5 to 10% above that, that's okay. If I eat 5 to 10% below that, that's okay. You just want to be in that ballpark. We want to be in a range. So 150 to 200 calories as a range is pretty good. That's possible to be consistent with. So that's the idea, is we want to have not only a number, but we want to have a range. So protein, we took their lean body weight, times it by 0.6, and we give that little bit of allowance, a plus or minus allowance. We're looking at 70 to 80 grams of protein. So what they were doing before, when they ended the drug, is 1,300 calories and 60 grams of protein. What we want them eventually to be doing is 1,550 to 1,700 calories with 70 to 80 grams of protein. Now, the key is we can't just jump right to that. You have to slowly go from where you've ended the drug to these minimum healthy kind of target ranges. So we're going to start aiming for stage 1, which is going to be 1,200 to 1,400 calories. So if we know she's around 1,300, again, we want to give a range that's doable, right? We want to give her a range because we know, plus or minus a little bit, normal variance every day. So we're going to aim for 1,200 to 1,400 calories. Protein is going to be 50 to 70 grams. I want her to do that. Be consistent with that. And then we're going to move up a little bit. So the rate of us moving up is going to be every 2 to 4 weeks. If they're consistent with at least 10 out of 14 days, so that's 2 weeks. If they got 10 out of 14 days within their targets of both calorie and protein, then we'll go ahead and move up. If they're not consistent within 10 out of 14 days, we can't move up. We have to work on consistency. So our goal is 10 out of 14 days. If they can do that 10 out of 14 days, we move up. Once they can do that, so maybe they don't get it in the first 2 weeks, but between weeks 2 and 3, they finally get 10 out of 14, boom, then we can move up. So you just move up whenever they're 10 out of 14 days consistent. Then, how much we move up is around 50 calories and 5 grams of protein. So stage 1 calories is 1,200 to 1,400. Stage 2 calories is 1,250 to 1,450. So we just bump up the range, 50 calories on the bottom, 50 calories on the top. Then protein, the first stage was 50 to 70 grams. Stage 2 is going to be 55 to 75. So again, we just add 5. Bump the range up by 5. Stage 3, we go from 1,250 to 1,450 calories up to 1,300 to 1,500. Then protein goes from 55 to 75 up to 60 to 80, right? So you just add 50 calories to the range, and you add 5 grams of protein to the range as you go through the stages. This will allow them by stage 4 to hit their minimum target range for protein. Once we hit the minimum range for protein, if we hit that before we hit the minimum range on calories, we stop adding protein because we want to hold that baseline of health for protein, but we want to allow the proper percentage and amount of energy nutrients, carbs and fats. So, but rather than us continuing to increase protein, and then they're always going to be in this like slight carb and fat deficit, we want to normalize that deficit first and then start bumping everything up. So for this client, it's going to take 7 stages to get them to our minimum target range for both calories and protein. From there, as the person feels comfortable, we would continue to increase calories and protein and add in muscle damage based resistance training, and they would be essentially at a healthy metabolism and just do what normal healthy people do. So these 7 stages on average are going to take 14 to 28 weeks, depends on how consistent the person can be. So it's going to take 3.5 up to 7 months. For some people that sounds really long, and they're going to say, can you go faster? The answer is you could, but you're going to experience more body fat formation. Remember that our goal is to feed the body what it can use, and then push it and promote it to use just a little bit more. Push it and promote it to use a little bit more. If you just dump a whole bunch of excess in, the metabolism is so far reduced, it's not going to burn that off. It's going to end up creating storage out of that, and you're going to get fat. So what happens is if you go faster, you're just going to have to diet all that back off anyhow. Right? So you can go faster, but you'd experience more body fat formation, and you're going to experience a lot of mental stress seeing your weight go up. So by going slowly through the process is a better mental process for the individual. It minimizes body fat formation, so at the end of the process, they're much leaner. Otherwise, if you were to take the same steps, say in 2 months, you would have to spend additional months on the back end dieting off the fat that was gained by moving so quickly. So the net total time is actually about the same, but there's a shit ton more mental stress because the person saw their weight showed up and then they have to go back into a diet again. They're like, what the hell? I just did this diet with all these drugs, and it's just super chaotic for the person emotionally and mentally. So some exceptions to the speed have been made when the person wants to prioritize healthy hormones more than they care about their weight. So if they lost their period and that's really freaking them out, and that's definitely an unhealthy state, we would work to bring back the period as quickly as we could, and then we would slow down the progressions from there. And we would also be more aggressive towards adding in strength-based training and daily step count in order to minimize the body fat storage. But some people, they're not ready for all that. They're not ready for this refeeding diet plus strength training because they've never been in the gym before. They don't know, they're not familiar with that. And daily step count, they're like, dude, I'm already busy, I'm crazy, I'm doing everything I can. So some people have capacity to add multiple elements to the program. Some people don't. So we stay within whatever capacity that person has and then slowly expand the capacity over time. So that's the process after Ozempic. You have to rebuild the body's metabolism and allow the body to reestablish a healthy rate of caloric usage. So we focus on calories and protein as our primary macronutrients, but we do want to ensure we're eating healthy fats, sugars are kept to a minimum, and we play around with our timing as the person is able to. We peak our energy nutrients, carbs and fats during the day, taper off towards the night, and we keep protein consistent throughout the day. These are all small tweaks, small changes, small adjustments we make throughout the process. So specific foods that we use, they're all based on the individual's preference. If they need gluten-free, we do gluten-free. If they want no dairy, we do no dairy. If they want animal products, great. If they want no animal products, great. I don't care. We just want to get our calories, our protein, some healthy fats in there, keep our sugars to a minimum, and then make sure that we're timing our carbs and fats more during the day than at night, and keeping our protein consistent during the day. That's it. So the goal through this process isn't to use a restrictive process, but an inclusive process. We want to learn how to eat quote-unquote normal foods in a healthy and controlled way so we never need Ozempic again. Like what you do after Ozempic should be, unfortunately, what you would have needed to do before Ozempic. But we didn't have the motivation. We were depressed. Maybe there were health concerns. For whatever reason, Ozempic seemed like a good choice. And if you took it and you lost a lot of body fat, it worked for what it does. Now the key, though, is what do we do after Ozempic? And after Ozempic, we have to learn how to eat in a healthy way. But we do have to do that in a very systematic and controlled way, so we give our body time to rebuild its metabolism. After Ozempic, you're going to feel like you can just look at food and you'll gain weight. And as true as that statement could be in a literal sense, you're going to be as close to that as being true as possible. Because your metabolism is so slow, it's so low that you are going to store more body fat at what will be considered normal caloric ranges than you would have before Ozempic. The great part about Ozempic is the body fat's off, right? The hard part is how do you keep it off? But today's podcast explained that process. It 100% can be done. I've done it already for bajillions of people. Oh my gosh, probably closing in on 100. Probably closing in on 100 people that I've taken this process and sent the numbers to them. And this also includes trainers. I do ghost programming. So I do programming for trainers. Over half my clients are personal trainers. So I do count their clients that I help as like clients I helped. So like I help trainers, like they'll say, hey, I got people coming at me with this question, what do I do? And I'll say, here's this system, here's the approach. So I give them this system. And then I answer their questions. They go out and help 20 people. So I do consider that as 20 people I helped. So maybe I'm fudging the numbers a bit to make myself feel better. But that's literal, like I gave the information, they were helped with it. So I feel that's okay. You can tell me if I'm full of shit or not. But it's definitely closing in on 100, if not at 100 or more, where this system has been applied and it's worked and it's been great. So Ozempic is around. People are going to use it. What do we do after? That's the question, is what do we do after Ozempic? And just slowly rebuilding the process, slowly rebuilding the metabolism, letting the body just get healthy again, but doing it in a way in which we learn how to actually manage body fat in the first place. Like I want to eat healthy, but I want to stay lean, right? So that's what we got to learn. Whether we learn it before Ozempic, whether we learn it after Ozempic, we got to learn it eventually. If I want to eat food and stay lean, I eventually have to learn that, whether I do it before or after, right? So this process is specific because we have to rebuild the metabolism from a crappy state. When somebody hasn't taken Ozempic yet, maybe their metabolism isn't trash, so it's a little bit of a different process for sure, but the end goal is still the same, is how do I eat and maintain a lean body weight? We have to learn that. So this process helps the person do that. If you have any questions about applying this process, just shoot me a message on our website, www.brutalirongym.com. You can check out our one-on-one services. I do work with people one-on-one for this purpose, so you can check out that service, or you can just shoot me a message on the homepage if you just have a general question. On the homepage, www.brutalirongym.com, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see a contact form. You can send me a message anytime. I'll answer it. I'll get back to everybody within 2 weeks. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it gave you hope and it gave you a system that you can use. Then if you have any questions when you're applying this system, whether you're a trainer or you're doing it for yourself, just let me know. Like, reach out. I'm here. If you've taken the time to listen to this podcast, I genuinely appreciate you for supporting me. So I would be happy to give that back. I'd be happy to give some support back to you. Awesome. Okay. Well, if you like the podcast, if you believe that this podcast would be helpful, please share it. I think this would be a really, really good one to share because a lot of people are leaning into Ozempic. They're leaning into these type of drugs right now for weight loss, but it's causing a lot of emotional and mental stress afterwards. It would be very helpful for people to know what to do afterwards. So please consider sharing this podcast on social media that reaches the most amount of people, but also share it in a conversation. If you hear anybody struggling with this issue, let them know about the podcast, let them know about our website, our services, and let them know that there is help. There's somebody who understands and can help them in their journey. Awesome. Well, if you like the podcast, you can also consider donating to support the podcast, which you can do on our website. And then if you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.